that leadership as well. So I kind of doing all of that at the same time. Okay, that looks good. I think I got us up. I'm about to full screen us now. That'll work. What you drinking, man? Yes. Yes, my name is Christ in Comics here on social media, also known as Kentario. I am, of course, a elder at my church, the Heart Church here in Spartanburg, South Carolina. But not only that, I do YouTube videos as well as TikTok media talking about anime, manga, and comic books and associating that back to the gospel of Jesus Christ. And Nerdy Christian has brought me on to basically have that conversation, kind of express, how I got to this point, how I got to these points with my views, what I love about comic books and media like that, but even more so, what is it that's drawn me to Christ? What is it that I'm looking forward with my relationship with Christ? And diving all the way into that. But we got to be careful, because if we don't, we'll probably discuss the whole Bible at some point. Mm, absolutely. Thank you. Amen. I agree. Okay. Hmm.
There as well, and make sure. And like I said, went on there because TikTok has been giving me issues, and I need to make sure that the content that I make is actually protected. Because TikTok will randomly um, TikTok will randomly silence your videos, right? I had videos. I had a blind reaction taken down. That was just a joke.
Wow.
And I got the appeal, and I won the appeal, but still,
Good, good, good. But
it was kind of annoying that.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I think, I guess the thing I could say to that is, well, I definitely wouldn't mind going on to Rumble or other platforms that will actually support the content that I'm doing and support your content that you're doing. And it's not that you're wrong for going to Rumble. I completely agree with making that move. I think being business minded, you do need to be willing to make moves that you otherwise would not do. I'm currently at this place of opposition means I'm doing something right. Not every time, but just as far as when it comes to doing ministry and the video gets taken down, or you're going live and you say something that offends the thing. I don't get mad about those things. I'll call it out, but I don't get mad because that means I'm at least trying to walk in the way of the Lord. So if I'm getting that opposition, I'm doing something right. And if I leave that, then the area where my ministry is supposed to be actually having that impact, where there's opposition, then I'm running away. I'm not fulfilling anything. I mean, even Paul had to go back into town after being nearly stoned to death because he said, well, "Hey, my work here ain't done yet," and he went right back into the town. That doesn't mean I should always stick on TikTok and YouTube if they keep flagging me and stuff like that. But we do have to have that wisdom to keep going or shift.
Yeah, definitely. I would definitely agree with you on that. So, with all of that out the way, I hope you like the background.
I do.
I like adding the color. It was kind of an accident that like purple and white kind of became the theme of my account, but it did, and so I was like, you know what, I'll just stick with it, even though my favorite colors are Spider-Man's colors. But we'll talk about that.
Hey, that's for later. That's for later.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
the blue does suit me. So the area I'm in on this side, perfect.
Yes.
Perfect.
That's what. Yeah. So, tell us a little bit of your backstory. Tell us, like, I guess how you became a Christian, and then also how you became nerdy. Go ham.
Wow, that's loaded. Well, backstory for me. My dad was not saved. My mother was brought up in the faith, but she never truly gave herself over to it. Even more so, I guess you could say she stepped away throughout her college years. And my parents met in Germany. They got married, and then July of 1990, they were going to church, trying to find something else to do. With my dad being in the military, he was shifted to Hawaii. So my mom and them and myself, we were all there. Well, I wasn't born yet, but I was in the belly. And so in that moment in July, my dad was unctioned to go forward. The Holy Spirit moved on him. Nothing else mattered. He wasn't thinking about anything else. All he could think about was, I have to go up there. I got to do this. I need to give my life to Christ. They made that call. He went up and he gave his life to the Lord. He started throwing away all the secular music in the house, made my mom and my big brother mad. And then, about July, August, September, October, November, 5 months later, I was born. So I wouldn't even really have a relationship with Christ in the household had my dad not gotten saved 5 months before my birth. So I was brought up in a Christian home. And in being brought up in a Christian home, you're constantly being exposed to it. And one of the things that I can say honestly is that I do not recall when I gave my life to Christ intentionally because I was so young. And so I knew that I meant it, and I knew that I aimed toward walking that out in spite of all of the things that I went through. I won't get into the personal details of my experiences. I'm waiting to do that. I'm not fully ready to do that just yet. But my dad actually just sent this to me. I think it was about 4 days ago, where he opened up one of his older Bibles, and it was written in the top corner that I gave my life to Christ at this age. I was age 8 when I officially made the declaration of my own. I was in my room by myself, and that's when I did it because my dad he goes around the house at night, check on everybody, and he saw me doing that when I was 8 years old. And so I officially gave my life when I was 8. I was working in the church by the time I was 10 years old. Dad started having his own church. I was helping in all different areas. I started ministering by the time I was 10 years old, serving on the praise and worship team at 10 years old. All of that I was engulfed in by that time. Now, at the same time, I was already getting caught up when it came to superheroes, Marvel Comics, DC. I loved all of it. I was watching Spider-Man the animated series. I was watching Justice League, Batman the animated series, all of it. I was watching all the shows, man. I'm telling you. Oh my goodness.
Did you watch the X-Men animated series?
Watch the X-Men animated series, Fantastic Four animated series. I was in it. I was in it hard, man. Anytime when it was Saturday morning, your boy got up. That's the only time I'll get up early, happy. Getting up at 8, 9 in the morning on a Saturday, sat down in front of the television just to watch those shows. Unless my mom was dragging me to the nursing home to go minister to old people. Didn't hate it, made friends, but I really hated missing those cartoons. So I was, man. But the thing was, I didn't get introduced to anime until I moved here to Spartanburg when I was 8 years old. So that's when I saw Outlaw Star, Sailor Moon, Inuyasha, Yu Yu Hakusho, Rurouni Kenshin, Dragon Ball Z. That's when I got introduced, Gundam Wing. I got introduced to all that in that moment. It's just like all at the same time. And so it's just like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
And I can't articulate it clearly, but it's like the gospel is the core of who I am. It's like the core of everything that I stand for. No matter what I learn, no matter what I'm introduced to, I may ask questions or I may not be convinced, but I'm always drawn to the gospel above everything else. So as I'm watching these shows, when I'm looking at what I think a hero should be like or what I would expect from a villain, the gospel was the root of all of that. So when I watch superhero shows, it immediately clicked back to my faith. When I watched Dragon Ball, when I watched Gundam Wing, all of those shows, there was always this connection. There's a hero that's like God. There's a villain that's like the devil. That was it for me. And so I was always into this stuff because it was illustrating what I was reading in the Bible when I barely could picture anything in Scripture. So, but that's what really got me into it. I love superheroes. Not to spoil, because I know you still want to talk about that, but Spider-Man was my very first comic book hero. Very first. And for some strange reason, it's like, one thing I don't think people give credit to children enough for, children can't articulate that they understand, but for some reason in their body they do. So, like, for example, I love Spider-Man because Spider-Man was an underdog. You had Superman. I didn't care about Superman. He had all the powers. There's Batman. Batman was cool, but, man, they're like, he was a billionaire. That's that. But Peter Parker, that man struggled as a human, and then he struggled as a hero. And so I'm just like, I don't know why, but I connect with all of this pain, the struggle, the fighting to choose good when evil is presented to you. And on some level, I already understood that from the Bible. So, and I couldn't tell you I understood that, but I did. And so when I saw that of Spider-Man, it was just like, man, he's living out what it's like to be even a Christian, but he's not a Christian character, quote unquote. And so that's where my connections came from. That's where it really got hooked in for me.
That's nice. That is really, really dope. Yeah. I got into really nerdy things at a really young age. I was watching because for me, because I was born in 03. So I was born at a very fantastic time for media because I was born right after the first Spider-Man movie, and it was the highest grossing superhero movie of all time for a while.
Yes.
So I was born. So I watched late 90s, early 2000s garbage of a lot of it. Daredevil, Elektra, Catwoman.
Come on.
Those campy old Batman movies.
Dude, yes. Arnold Schwarzenegger as Mr. Freeze. I did not look. Respectfully, okay. In one sense, I have a question, and then two, I want to say, I know people give it flack. They give the old Batman movies flack and all that, but I'm like, I enjoyed it. I just thought I was watching Batman. I don't know about you guys, but all these people express all these detailed reasons why they didn't like it. I'm just like,
they're not good movies, but they're goofy and campy. So it's like they don't. It's like this obviously is not being taken as seriously as like no one thinks of Jim Carrey's performance and it's like, yeah, he's taking this very, very seriously. You know what I mean? Like he was good in the movie, but he was also obviously very goofy.
Now, if you ask me, he should have been the Joker.
Yeah, a lot. Have you continued to say that even now? I would love to see him as the Joker. I was thinking about him before Joaquin Phoenix.
Real. But I guess you could say, I don't know if you've been not keeping track, but you've been aware the mental stress he's been under lately. For over the past 10 years, he's been going through it a lot mentally. So for him to even step into that role would probably be hazardous to his mental state.
Jim Carrey?
So
Oh
yeah,
no, he was.
yeah,
Yeah, no,
yeah.
yeah.
So I could see Jim Carrey not doing it, at least not now. Back then, sure. Now, nah, nah. Mm-mm.
Yeah.
That man
No,
will
that's
fall
fair.
apart.
That's fair. Do what you gotta do for your mental health. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
That's
Now,
the type of guy Jim.
my question was though,
Mm,
the Daredevil movie. What do
yeah,
you think?
that it was not. It, it was not. The only good thing that came out of that movie was, and it's so sad because Ben Affleck seems to actually like comics, but he just can't get a W. Um,
He cannot get a W at all, no matter how hard he tries. Marvel, DC, he just not built for it.
yeah, yeah, but the one good thing though is that I kind of liked Cuba Gooding Jr. No, not Cuba. That was not his name. Um, the black guy who played Kingpin, the actor.
Oh, you about to open up a can of worms, man.
I thought he was okay. You know what's cool?
What?
My dad bought me a Spider-Man animated
Hmm.
series. It was fun fact. This series was actually supposed to follow the first Spider-Man movie, but it
Okay.
looks so different and it has a completely different story, such that you would never know. The only important plot thread is that Spider-Man and Mary Jane are doing their thing, and Green Goblin is dead. But like
Okay.
other than that, you wouldn't be able to tell. Like Peter's blonde in the animated, or not blonde. Harry's blonde in the animated movie. He looks
Okay.
it's yeah, it's weird. Anyway, but in there, there's an episode where they have the Kingpin, and he's black. He's voiced
Hmm.
by the black actor, and I was like, that's
Huh.
pretty good. I thought he did all right. Yeah, but yeah, no. So I grew up around that time, right? So I when superheroes when people were starting to realize that this was more than just nerds, right?
Oh,
Like
dude, yes.
this is something that is about to cross the border from
Hmm.
something that nerds like to something that everyone's aware of. Like
Yes.
I was a kid when the first Avengers movie came out, and that did I honestly think that these Marvel, particularly Marvel, because DC
Hmm.
was lagging, but particularly Marvel has done a lot to make it actually okay in culture to be an adult and like superheroes.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think with that, what I think helps Marvel sell is the difference that I found because I had to identify. I don't hate DC, but when
I
it comes to like DC versus Marvel, I would choose Marvel any day of the week. But what I realized was DC's good at making stories, which is why their animated series are successes, but
oh
their live actions aren't. However, when it comes to the Marvel's great at designing or establishing characters. So if you're establishing characters that people can relate to or get mad at or whatever the case may be because they're fulfilling their role, you're going to be more drawn to that. And granted, that does contribute to the story a bit more, but it's above all else is really characters. Everybody has someone, excuse me, by the way, everybody has somebody that they're relating to or connecting with or hating or getting frustrated with, no matter what the case may be. So think back to this, right? Now, I am an avid hater of Captain Marvel. She doesn't even deserve the title Captain. That's Miss Marvel. That is Miss
oh
Marvel. She will
man.
never be Captain to me. She is Miss Marvel. But my reasons are two separate reasons. Granted, I do agree with the audience when they're just like, there's really nothing to her. She just kind of shows up as a powerhouse and is emotionless. Like when you're looking at Marvel, you're looking at character, expression, development, behavior. You look for that.
Yeah.
You don't get that with Miss Marvel. She's just very blunt. She's like, yeah, yeah. Who's this? I'll beat him up. Pow. And it's like, we don't care for that. We'll watch DC if we want that. Like we don't want to
Yeah.
watch Marvel
I
for
think
that.
I think that people have often cited like the difference between Marvel and DC is that DC is like making gods and how and
Mm-hmm.
telling us how they relate to us, and Marvel's
Mm-hmm.
making humans and telling us how they relate to uh, these ideals and things like that. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if necessarily say how they relate to gods. I don't know if the distinction would be the reverse of each other exactly, but there is a more human element to Marvel and a more divine element to DC in that regard. I mean, that was literally that was literally the driving force behind Batman vs Superman. I
Oh,
don't know if people,
absolutely.
like, I don't know how much people caught that, especially like in the extended edition. But like,
Hmm.
Lex Luthor's whole thing is that like he doesn't want humanity to have a messiah anymore. He wants them to be able to get to a point where they can save themselves, and he
Mm.
Superman is a huge stumbling block to that. So Superman to him would be essentially be a false god or false messiah. Um, and maybe this incarnation of Superman is.
Mm.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I love Superman. But
I
yeah.
hate
So I,
Superman.
but, huh?
I hate Superman.
That's so unfortunate. So you got to hear me out. I also grew up with Smallville. Okay,
No,
I
hey, hold on,
I
hold on,
watched
hold on,
Smallville with my mom, bro. You can't.
hold on, hold on, hold on. Don't get it twisted. I'm about to embarrass myself, and at the same time, make it clear. Now, I hate Superman. I love Smallville.
Mhm.
Because Smallville, you're getting the humane side to Clark. You're not
Exactly.
getting the fix it, fix it, fix it. And
Yeah.
Clark struggled. Clark struggled a lot. Man,
Superman.
and
How you gonna hate Superman, bro?
I'm
How you gonna
okay.
hate the
Okay.
resistance?
I'm sorry, but if you know me, who's one of my favorite anime characters? Come on, you already know. Who is it?
Luffy, right?
Monkey D. Luffy. You're telling me that a guy who stretches is out here boxing with everybody? Everybody? He wants to smoke. And he don't just want to smoke. He's winning. Now you can say, oh, they knocked Luffy out. But Luffy got back up. I don't care how many times he loses, Luffy's getting back up. That's the underdog. That's Spider-Man to me. So I love
That's
an
fair.
underdog person who doesn't have the OP power you would expect. But with the and this is where it gets really humane. With the hand you've been dealt, you can still make a difference.
Yeah.
That's
No,
that
that's
real
fair. That's
testimony that I
exactly
get from Luffy, that I get from Spider-Man. You don't get that from Superman.
that's
You
fair.
you get I can do it all, but everyone doesn't trust me. So because you hate me, fine, I'll kill you. Like I can't stand that side to Superman. I don't like it.
No,
That. Mm-mm.
that's fair. I think that um yeah, Luffy is a powerhouse. I love his motivation. Yeah,
Amen. Yes.
yeah, definitely, definitely. Um,
Yes.
I, and this is something that we'll talk about because I've seen you respond to people who think like this, and I want to show you just a little clip of someone who of a big Christian YouTube channel who's thinking like this.
Okay.
Um, but there are a lot of people who think that like Marvel movies and DC movies and anime and stuff is demonic, which is really just an outgrowth from the Satanic Panic that happened
Mm-hmm.
in the 70s and continuing on to this day.
Mm-hmm.
But what I like want to keep pointing out to people is that Superman is a type of Christ, and that's one of the reasons why I started liking him a lot more. Is that um, I mean, he was created by Jewish people, right? Like
Yes.
his story initially, and his story was meant to resemble them. But and I'm not saying this is intentional, but I
Mm-hmm.
do think that as they resembled themselves in the character of Superman, they and their own Jewish concepts, they
Yes.
also did show themes and concepts that relate to Christ as well. Goku does too, which is
Mm-hmm.
part of the reason why I like Goku so much. Because if anyone doesn't know, there's a study in Christian theology called typology, which
Okay.
is the study of basically comparing and contrasting people types or shadows in the Old Testament to their fulfillment in Christ. So a
Okay.
perfect example of this would be Romans 5. Jesus is the second Adam, right? So Paul
Yes.
compares
Yes.
and contrasts Adam to Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus does this. He says, "As the serpent was lifted up in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up." Right. So he's
Yes.
comparing and contrasting himself. There's something
Mm-hmm.
similar about the snake in the wilderness, Adam and Jesus, among other things. Well, I started doing that with cinema and media in general, and oh my goodness,
Look.
it was amazing the stuff that I found that I honestly didn't feel like I was reading into it. It
Mm-hmm.
honestly felt like it was just because Christianity just saturates Western culture so much, it becomes the lenses by which we make things and
Mm-hmm.
see things. And even like uh non-religious like nerdy YouTube channels
Yeah.
have critiqued the new Superman for being like Jesus. Like that was the problem with Justice League. They
But
were
see,
literally trying to resurrect Jesus so they could just win.
exactly, absolutely. And so I know you got a clip to play, but kind of I can't let that just be. And it's not you say anything wrong. I'm saying like cause I'm like stirred up because
Oh, go ahead.
my thing with that is I agree with not idolizing these characters as if they are an adequate replacement for Jesus. So, for example,
Yes.
right, you know how Jesus asked the disciples, "Who do men say that I am?" versus "Who do you say that I am?" It's like, okay, these people embody this, but I'm the actual. And then people can make the mistake of, I totally agree, of going, "Oh, that seems like Jesus, but I really like Luffy, so let me just really focus on Luffy." It's like, no, I see Luffy demonstrating Christ-like character. Let me get more into my word. Let me get more into the Bible. Let me seek him, because if anyone knows what it means to be free, that's Jesus. And so
Yeah.
that kind of focus is the thing that with my media and with your media that we're aiming to do, is to make those types of things clear, because I'm a firm believer in this wholeheartedly, that the different religions across the world are attempting to tell the same story about God, about Jesus Christ, about the Holy Ghost, everything that he intended, what's taking place in the spiritual realm. They're all trying to tell the same story, they're just telling it different ways. And the thing is, we hold to the faith that the gospel of Jesus got it right. Because people bring this up too, right? They bring up. I'm wanting to study this more so that I can actually do a full on video talking about this. But they talk about how so many different religions, they have this son whose family died, or the son died, but then the son resurrected, or someone was resurrected, and then they saved all of humanity. So many different mythos have the story. But what these stories don't have, they don't have history to show that one person actually did it. The
Yeah.
Word, the Bible proves that Jesus actually did what everyone else is just being told could have happened or may have happened. Jesus proved himself to be the one to actually do it. Just like the 10 plagues. Y'all want to worship all of these Egyptian gods? Cool. God shows up to demonstrate that he is the one that rules over all of those facets of those Egyptian gods. So Jesus proves himself to be who he says he is each and every time. And that's what I hold to. I'm going to calm down
No, you're good. You're good. I fully support free speech. I'm not trying to sound like conservative. I'm really not. Like we're
Me
not gonna get
neither.
into politics. I don't really care about politics, but like I also don't want people.
Me neither. Now, I have my political perspectives on several different things, but yeah, me neither.
Yeah, yeah. But with that said, though, like I said, you've responded to this a lot. It looks like, from what I heard from your videos, you've actually been told this by your parents, right? Like the anime and these other things are demonic. Is that true?
Yes, yes. My crazy story,
Mm-hmm.
and I could be getting it wrong because I was a kid when he said it, but when you say something that sticks out to me, good or bad, I don't forget it. That sticks with
Mm-hmm.
me. And so one time, because he was trying to divert me away from Dragon Ball, like he hated Dragon Ball. My parents hated Dragon Ball Z, and so he was like, "Son, in Japan, they hold these tournaments and they put these special gloves on so that they can actually shoot these blasts and do these battles." And I'm sitting there like a kid. I'm just like, "Yay! Sign me up! Go over there! I'm ready to fight. What do you mean?" And so, and then he kind of ended it with the Dragon Ball Z is demonic. I'm like, "But where though, Dad? Like you're not making it clear how evil it is to me. So for you to just tell me it's evil, and it's like he wasn't listening." And I'm not bashing my dad. Let me just make that clear. I'm just being open about what communication between him and I was like when I was young.
Mm-hmm.
He would be telling me things. I would be looking at this and be seeing something totally different. Now, you could say, well, that's just simply rebellion. But when I'm saying I see this verse reflected in this character, I see this behavior in a Bible verse that you've been teaching me, then tell me where the Satanism is in it. Because I'm going back to the scriptures on this. What they're trying to do is what God's been wanting us to do. So I've never really been convinced of its evil because of that. When I can't find it, sure, don't watch it. I don't suggest it. But otherwise, yeah, if the gospel's in there, I'm in it.
Same. Yeah. I'll show a clip a little later, but one of my absolute favorite animated movies ever is Dante's Inferno, the
Mm.
animated movie, and it's extremely graphic because it's literally about a crusader who is not as virtuous as he appeared on the surface. Let's say, fighting through the realms of hell to try to get his fiance. And the story very much is not for anyone under 18. But
Definitely.
huh?
Definitely.
Yeah,
I agree. I
but
agree.
uh, I'll show a clip later. But like that story, even in its like Catholic context, I mean, we leaving the issue of Catholic theology to the side for the moment, this movie demonstrates the gospel, I think, pretty well, and even almost gets a little critical of Catholicism in
Mm.
a couple of different ways. I thought, like, one of the Crusaders walk out of the church, and Dante and his friend are talking, and the the Crusader goes, uh, he just had to throw me off. Um, can you see that comment?
I do. I do. I have not looked into these. So I'm gonna do a series on Pokemon. I'm gonna do a series for the TikTok, and I'm asking people if they think I should do a Patreon or not. I'm not gonna do a Patreon if people aren't gonna sign up. That'd be a waste of my time and others. But
Right.
I want to do a Patreon and a series on TikTok talking about how Pokemon is not demonic because they don't actually have evidence. They're just going off of. Do you see the way that they drew that person's head? Looks like horns.
I can't
Come on.
listen. Well, my King James only fundamentalist preacher says you're wrong. So
Oh no.
no, I'm kidding.
Oh, you were kidding? I took you seriously. I was like, what did he say? Please tell me. We can have that conversation.
No.
Oh, goodness.
No, it's funny. So my friend Jesse brings that up because, and you can check out the live streams, but we did a debate review. A atheistic Satanist decided to go to like Michigan University, Central Michigan University, and debate the members of the Westboro Baptist Church.
Mm,
And it was the Westboro Baptist did not disappoint. Let me just tell you
okay.
that. Yeah, they're a very radical cult that actually lied about their racism and a number of other things.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, they're also hyper Calvinists.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So yeah, they're kind of Calvinists except on steroids.
Oh, gosh.
So
So to be fair to your audience and then even to you, I am not theologically trained. So when it comes to like, let's say, I'm just now kind of getting a grasp of SBC. So like the events with Westboro Baptist, I don't fully grasp Calvinism, Presbyterianism, all of those different things. I'm not very privy to what the differences are, and even more so where that's like maybe they're not saved. So I don't get into those type of conversations mainly because of my ignorance. I just one thing I also believe: if you don't know, don't talk about it. So I don't know, so I don't want
no,
to talk about it.
that's totally fair. I wish more people did that on TikTok.
Oh,
Maybe
same, dude.
we would have less people saying that stars don't exist because the Bible says so. Um,
Yeah, young Earth
but
creationism. I'm just now getting into that too. Like I'm just like, oh,
yeah,
they're arguing about this. Why?
whoop, my bad.
No, you good. Now people
Yeah,
saying you're not really a Christian if you don't believe God literally made it in 7 days. I'm like, what?
it's yeah.
Oh my.
Making a video talking about why I'm not in Earth creationist currently. Yeah, there's interesting things there. Yeah. So have you ever heard of Little Light Studios?
I can't stand them, but yes.
Oh, so okay, so you have seen their videos.
I plan on doing a series of reaction videos. I already reacted to their Dragon Ball Z review, so I'm going to be reacting to their Marvel reviews here soon.
That is so perfect. I was literally going to ask you to do a review with me of them because they are insane.
Go right ahead. I'm down, man.
That is, yeah, they are insane. But yeah, no, I'll show you this clip. It's only a minute long. I don't think anyone should copyright me. Um, give me 1 second. Yeah, so
Yeah.
This is Satanic Sailor Moon Secrets Exposed. So be prepared to be absolutely destroyed.
Let's
During sex
go.
comics.
There are a ton of questionable
Can you hear that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
messages and occult references that are very problematic for any Christian. I'm talking about magic, sorcery, spells, and reincarnation, and even underage drinking of alcohol.
Wow, it reminds me of when the book of Revelation describes God's people having a seal on their foreheads, and the
Yeah,
wicked
because
having a
teens
mark
don't
of the
drink.
beast in their foreheads. Also, like the opening of the third eye in Eastern and New Age religions. There's a ton of demonic possession in those shows.
Notice that there are 5 sailor girls, each named after different planets. The number 5 in the Wiccan religion represents the 5 points of the pentagram.
Hey, speaking of Wicca, these magical girls are even called guardians.
Uniting our hearts to fight as one is what makes us Sailor Guardians.
Which is Wiccan lingo for the watchtowers that correspond to the 4 directions and the 4 elements. When the watchtowers are invoked, it symbolizes the connection to all things that exist, the 5th element being spirit. The series borrows...
Yeah. So you have been refuted. I hope that you turn away from your evil. I can't even.
Oh, goodness gracious. Okay.
So
Alright.
you know more about Sailor Moon than I do, so please feel free to.
The thing is, I actually don't. And I say that because I haven't watched Sailor Moon since I was a kid. I just really liked the show. I was just like, whichever one, Sailor Saturn and Sailor Venus, 2 favorite Sailor Moon girls. Love both of them. And yeah, I was on my waifu phase and simping when I was a kid. You know, it's like, those are my girlfriends right there. Like, I was like that when I was a kid. I left that when I matured. So, but when it comes to Sailor Moon, the thing about them is they are associating to astrology. They get their powers to fight to defend the earth. Sure, I get what the concept is, and even more so, it's empowering young women to do good. The thing about Sailor Moon, though, is that people are messing up. Is back when it was created, it wasn't created to introduce children to astrology, which is the misconcept that I would say it takes place when it comes to Sailor Moon. Now, because I don't fully know what the story is, what their goals are, what they're looking to do and communicate, I can't say that Little Light Studios is entirely wrong. What I disagree with them on is them making those statements about this is Wiccan because of the 5-point star and this. I'm like, don't you know that the 5-pointed star, when the point is at the top, is a representation of God, is over all of creation. That's why the Satanists use the flipped version saying all of creation is over God. So you want to specify, well, what do you mean by they're the 5-pointed star? Are they the one with God above or they're the one with God below? You got to clarify those type of claims. You can't just make the claim and make us go, oh my God, they're doing that? My daughter's not watching Sailor Moon. You don't even know what that is. You haven't even researched Wiccan behavior, so how can you make the claim? The other thing, too, is, and they probably wouldn't want to talk about this, the 3 wise men, what was their occupation?
Yeah.
The 3 wise men were astrologers from a non-God-fearing nation, looking at the stars like they do, making their visions and prophecies, all that they normally do. And they saw a pattern, identified it, and followed it through to find Jesus. So you're telling me that the spirit that God allowed for non-believers to pick up on him with their ungodly demonic practices to come and find Jesus. Not only were they welcomed in Jesus' presence, Jesus received their gifts too? Right. If it was that bad, Mary and them would have been like, get away from us with your demonic gifts. Right? No, but they received them. So when we really want to be that hard pressed against it, everything that they're worshiping was created by God. We just got to get them back to focusing on the creator of it, not getting them focused on not looking at the stars at all. So that's as far as I kind of go with Sailor Moon. I don't think it's that evil.
Yeah. No, I don't either. The issue with Little Light Studios and these other people in general is there's a few things that are happening. One of the really important things to mention is that all of this is a guilt by association fallacy.
Yes.
Just because this thing and this thing look similar, there must be a connection. Also parallelomania, right? Yeah, yes. Just because these two things are doing something that, if you squint, look the same,
Mm-hmm.
then they are doing the same thing.
Yes.
And which is, once you've studied the Old Testament, for example, then you realize you cannot make this claim because pagans built temples. God had a temple dedicated to him.
Mm-hmm.
Other people slaughtered animals for ritualistic and religious purposes.
Yep.
So did Israel. There are times where the Bible will quote pagan and blasphemous text and actually add it to its own theology.
Mm-hmm.
Not completely wholesale, it's a little different, such as the insertion of monotheism or something like that, trying to make Yahweh the one who's doing this, not Baal or something like that. But
Right.
it does do that. And so if you're going to make this guilt by association, then you're going to have to say that David and Paul were were demonic themselves
Mm-hmm.
because they used messages from other material in order to make their own points.
Well, see, the classic thing, two things with that. One classic point. They always got mad at Jesus. Why? He's talking to the prostitutes. He's talking to them poor people. He's out in the streets doing this, doing that. It's the same thing Little Light Studios is doing. They're making Pharisaic claims. And then to go a step further, I don't know the study on this. Maybe you do. Maybe y'all have researched this. But why do we anoint the forehead?
Right. It was something that was done in the Old Testament.
Mm-hmm. And even Moses would touch people's foreheads with the blood of the animals that they would sacrifice. They would touch their foreheads with blood to their face. And so where they're talking about where they're putting the mark of the beast on their foreheads and opening the third eye, I'm like, well, we've touched the forehead. What was our reason for doing it? That's something to actually get a better understanding of.
Yeah, that's another thing. That's another thing too. An example of the second issue here. It's not only that this is parallelomania and guilt by association fallacy,
Mm-hmm.
or a genetic fallacy as well. The connections that they make are also completely arbitrary.
Yes.
Because so much exists in the world, you could, with this fallacious thinking, connect anything to anything.
Yes.
So one perfect line of reasoning I could do is say, well, what's the problem with Batman? Well, Batman symbolizes bats. Well, who else really likes bats? Vampires.
Vampires.
And vampires are evil and demonic.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the origin of them. So therefore, Batman is demonic.
So let me. I'm gonna stick there with you. I gotta stick there with you because I wanted to talk about this during Halloween. Vampires. Okay. Notice what the curse is. If you become a vampire, you're permanently sent to hell. Point blank. Period. You're telling me that the redeeming blood of Jesus can't save somebody who's been turned into a vampire? That's one.
Yeah.
Now, if we translate that concept to reality, right? How many people commit sins that they look at their lives and the turmoil that they're in and they say, well, God would never accept me because of all the wrong that I did? There's so many people.
I think that currently.
Yeah, there's so many people that just stay in that pocket of, I'm too dark, I'm too corrupt, I'm too evil, Jesus will never love me, Jesus could never save me because of how jacked up I am. When we put that moniker of simply saying that if you get the vampire's curse, you'll never be saved, or that you're eternally going to burn in hell, there's so many people that already think that way about natural life. And then you're going to add that into that, you're really just saying, that Jesus is not for them. We set people up to not choose to follow Jesus.
Yeah. No, yeah, and I guess to take that detour with you, actually, I don't know if you ever seen the Vampire Diaries.
I've seen quite a bit of it, yes.
Yeah. So I would say I have two guilty pleasures. It's probably, well, I don't think I'll be guilty of the other one, but teen drama, supernatural teen drama is my guilty pleasure.
Love it.
I grew up with the Twilight franchise, right? I used to
Me
like
too.
movies, and then I realized they were bad, but then I can't stop watching. But Vampire Diaries was the other one, and
Okay.
so I, like everyone else, especially the girls, was really attracted to Damon. But
Okay.
part of the reason why Damon was so attractive to me was not. I mean, the actor does a phenomenal job and whatever, and he's attractive or whatever. But the main issue was that he was the thing that no one should love, but was loved anyway.
Yes, absolutely.
And in theory, both those statements are true.
Mm-hmm.
Like in some sense, you might, because in the logic of the show, he literally manipulates and preys on a 17-year-old girl in high school when he's like 100 and something years old.
Yeah,
Right.
they don't like talking about that though.
Yeah, and it's not like Stefan, because the relationship that's presented with Damon and this other girl is literally manipulative. Like he's fanging her, he's wiping away her memories so that he can keep doing this stuff again. It's horrific.
Yeah, I remember that. Yep.
Yet Elena, the main female character, still finds a way somehow to end up being interested in Damon. Damon was the villain initially.
Yes.
But it was the fact that people didn't give up on it. Now, obviously, this is also in part a very toxic situation with Vampire Diaries, and the actor has actually commented on this and commented on his frustration about this. But the character ended up becoming a one-trick pony because, as he mentioned, Damon could go into a nursing home and kill the children there.
Mm-hmm.
And then the audience would react by saying, well, he had a fight with Elena, guys. He's not very stable.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? Like, he'll come back. And that's what would happen repeatedly. He would be bad.
Mm-hmm.
Love was supposed to transform him. And then he maybe rides that coattail for a little bit, but then a toxic situation occurs, and then he goes right back.
Yes.
It was this revolving cycle over and over again.
Yes.
And as frustrating as it was for me to watch that, because I wanted him to get redeemed, because I thought the redemption arc, I think, mirrored in some ways human life with Jesus.
Yes.
At least from our perspective. He did finally get redeemed at the end, right? He sacrificed himself, and he did get the girl at the end. And so I do think that in part the allure of this sort of vampire mythology that we've created in these movies and shows is that these are people who you would initially find monstrous, hideous, and such, but then turn out that these are the people that you would end up loving for the rest of your life.
Right, and to kind of add on to this, when it comes to Elena, that I didn't realize this before, but I think I kind of realized it now. She's really fulfilling the relationship role that most women fall into. They either, like with Stefan, are being completely covered, protected, and provided for, because that's what Stefan did for her. He was always her covering and her protection and her shielding.
Oh, goodness. She was such a damsel in distress, and Stefan was the Spider-Man to her Mary Jane.
Exactly. Yeah. But then the other side is sometimes women fall in love with someone that they want to save. And that's who Damon was. That was someone for her to save. I can be useful. I can make a difference in his life. So that's why I would want to be with him. So that speaks to that for her.
Dating almost.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which is a huge problem. From experience, do not evangelistically date.
Oh yeah, I've been there. Don't do that.
Please don't.
Man, that was a bad couple of months. That was a bad couple of months.
Don't make the same mistakes I made, please.
Oh goodness.
Yeah. But no, yeah, and that is another thing though too. There's so much toxicity. I mean, they literally say in an argument that they are in a toxic relationship.
Yep.
Damon and Elena, because they definitely are. Especially because she ended up catching feelings for Damon after Stefan got out the picture.
Right.
And there's a whole bunch of stuff going on with all of that. But yeah, no, I binge watched Vampire Diaries. I watched Legacies too.
Mm-hmm.
Which
when I tell you what's wrong with Legacies, don't make me call my daughter in here. Look, when I tell you, my daughter finished Vampire Diaries all the way through. I watched Originals all the way through, and me and her watched Legacies all the way through together. And when I tell you, me and her bickered about how pathetic this show is. It was how do you go from Originals all the way up here? I'm talking about Niklaus, Elijah.
Klaus is a
Come
great
on,
character.
come on, to Legacies. Like, I'm about to rant. You brought this on yourself. How come every time Hope shows up, she's like, it's okay, I'm the Tri-Bridge. And then she doesn't save the day, everybody else does. Regardless of her. It doesn't make sense. She would hype herself up for no reason. But then the person who was like, turned out to be the best character, though they tried to make her seem like the worst character, was Lizzie. Lizzie ended up being the best character.
Yeah. No, I definitely think that the twins were the best characters.
Whoa, you like Josie? Whoa.
I thought they were better than most of the characters. I thought the teacher was kind of... He was decent initially in Vampire Diaries.
Yes, Alaric was dope in Vampire
There's
Diaries.
some controversy with the actual actor
Mhm.
being like a really weird Trump supporter and maybe racist.
Oh, wow.
Just with Vampire Diaries in general, there's a whole issue with racism, right?
Mhm.
Because of, Bonnie.
Look, me and we
situation.
talk about that too.
No,
The
yeah,
Bonnie
yeah.
treatment.
Um,
The Bonnie treatment. Ugh.
Yeah, but in the
Whew.
show, the mentor is really just that, and it's like, well, he could have. They were with him, and it was so
They
weird.
did.
It's like he ended up like getting married, and in a relationship with the girl whose like babies got in, and it was
Yeah, that was
the whole thing,
weird.
y'all. It's
That
the whole
was
thing.
weird.
It was so weird because she's not underage at that point in the show, but it's
Yeah.
also like you kind of watched her, not even necessarily watched her grow up, but like you're obviously much older. You're like 30s
Yeah.
with like an 18, 19-year-old, but like you've been put in this situation because she was the one that decided to carry these supernatural children.
These age boundaries are not being considered at
was-
all in this show, man.
And just make a more general comment. That's a problem with teen media in general.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
I don't know if it's just because you've talked about this from an anime perspective that this definitely is an issue in anime,
Mm-hmm.
but this is such an issue in teen drama. Like obviously we have Twilight and Vampire Diaries, which are 110-year-old men dating 16, 17-year-old
Mhm.
girls, and we're supposed to like that.
And so,
but-
the thing with that, man, is I don't like going down too much into that. Not because it's not a conversation that needs to be had, but because of how complex it is. So, if I'm gonna say it like this: if Edward Cullen was 250 pounds, snot nose, bad haircut, and he was trying to come for her, it would have been a problem. How could this big ugly dude who's also over 500 years old trying to flirt with this girl? But because he looks good, because he's handsome, we can tolerate it. Right? We can tolerate it. Even that new movie with Jennifer Lawrence, No Hard Feelings. She's a 30-something-year-old woman trying to sleep with and flirt with a 19-year-old boy. If now today we flip those roles and then they try to put that movie out as a comedy, everyone would think they're sick for making this movie. Why would you want a 30-year-old man flirting with a 19-year-old girl? That's sick. They're mad at Leonardo DiCaprio for doing that exact same thing right now. So, but you want to put out this movie as a comedy and make it natural or funny for that to be a relationship. That there's something wrong with that. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, this is a whole issue. Pretty Little Liars, if you ever heard of that show.
I have heard of that show. I think I got through like 2 or 3 seasons. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure. If I remember correctly, one of the climaxes of the show was a teacher who got married to their student because there was a student-teacher relationship in college. I think. I mean, they're adults, but like also, you know, this is weird. I'm sure there was some other stuff going on with that too, but there's that Riverdale. Riverdale is absolutely sick for this. I don't know if you've seen any of Riverdale.
I have, but I don't remember which instance you're talking about.
I mean, basically everything. They literally will promote their content by promoting these teenagers. I mean, these actors, adult actors playing
Mm-hmm.
teenagers, as being sexy and in very toxic
Yeah, yeah,
relationships.
yeah, yeah.
Archie has gotten this. Archie and the one girl, I forget her name, but they both got this terribly. Like Archie has literally been like, they put him in all these different roles just so that like they can show him off as being like really sexy and all of this.
Yeah.
So he ended up like being a sexy prisoner, you know what I'm saying,
Mm-hmm.
a really attractive boxer. He randomly, I think, did vigilante stuff
Yes, yes.
randomly.
I remember that, and it didn't work for his character because he
Yeah,
he didn't
the
even
show
do what
like
he set
had
out
him
to
fight a
do.
bear. The show like randomly had him like fight a bear or something off screen. And he won. It just had like a sexy scar on on his body or something.
What did they do? Watch Hajime no Ippo or something? Is that what they did?
Yeah,
I think
and
that's
this
what they
one
did.
girl, the one of the other main characters, she becomes a cam girl at um and it's worse for her because she becomes a cam girl when she's underage and she has Betty, I think her name was, because she had this like alter ego
Yeah.
called Betty. Yeah, and it was through that like she was doing all of this stuff, and it was yeah,
Uh,
that entire
yeah.
show is an
Let me let
abomination.
me let me just put this out there too. And I don't know if you do this for your audience, but for those that are watching here on my stream, uh, go ahead and just kind of preface and apologize if any of those sexual content that we were speaking of being in these shows is tempting you or influencing you in any way. I do sincerely apologize for exposing you to that. And if that is bothering you, do yourself a favor. Go ahead and just separate yourself from the stream for a moment and get yourself together. Don't subject
Yeah.
yourself to something just because you think you're okay. Don't play with your self control like that. Okay, guys.
Yeah, it's just a conversation that needs to be had.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah, I don't know how I don't know how we would change it though. Especially with, and I'm not saying this
Mm-hmm.
community wants to do this. I don't think they actually want to do this for the most part. But like obviously LGBTQ characters are obviously like in Vampire Diaries, Legacies, in
Mm-hmm.
Riverdale, so not only have we made right the sexualizing of children in in this media worse, but we're now including LGBTQ kids in
That makes that's another level.
as well. Now, I actually made a video arguing that I'm totally okay with LGBTQ characters in media. Like it didn't like, to go back to more nerdy stuff. It didn't bother me when Supergirl's sister was lesbian in season 2.
Okay.
What bothered me was that entire season.
Yeah. True. True.
It had nothing to do with that.
Right. Right.
I wasn't really bothered that much by it. The LGBTQ characters in the Arrowverse in general
Mm-hmm.
don't really bother me. And like I said, my favorite characters in Legacies were the twin sisters. I think they're better than, I mean, granted the competition isn't that great.
Right. So let me ask you that question then. So how do you feel about Christians being exposed to that? It's one thing to say for the world because the world's going to do what the world's going to do, but as believers, how do you think we should feel or view those types of things?
I I'm fine with it, honestly. I don't the this media is not Christian media.
Okay.
So I should not expect to have my full Christian worldview enveloped in something that was never made or intended for Christians. Um, and also, media is in large parts a representation of the reality. So as much as it is exaggerated,
Mm-hmm.
so it would seem vain to complain about Supergirl's sister becoming lesbian, and it would seem much more fruitful to talk about people in real life who are lesbian and how we have those meaningful relationships in the midst of disagreement.
Gotcha.
But going on a conservative media outlet to complain about the woke media just
Mm-hmm.
doesn't seem to be of much benefit to me.
Right. Right.
And not just to me, I mean just to this conversation as a whole. So,
Right.
and also, I thought about this too. I want to be consistent, right? So in Romans 1,
Mm-hmm.
of course, I would agree with the conservative view that Paul is talking about the fall of the created order and how all of that is working. And so now God has removed his protection from
Mm.
humanity, and things are humanity suffering a degradation after the
Yes.
fall. Although I don't necessarily think we're perfect prior to the fall. That's a different conversation. But so homosexuality, I would say, is in that list in Romans 1, but so is a bunch of other things like murder and
Mm-hmm.
a crap ton of other stuff.
Right.
But I love when people murder people in my media.
I can't believe you just confessed that.
so
I can't believe you just confessed that.
like I kind of need Frieza to blow up Planet Vegeta, right? Like,
I see.
you know what I mean?
Now, I guess to give my side on the same question, but to really point it out, I don't think people talk enough about the impact that Frieza's freaking finger beams had. Because we used to palm blast. Most everybody, boom, boom, boom. Frieza show up, and it's just like dead. I'm like, what? No way! Like this one finger. Oh, that's a problem. Sometimes I call Frieza she. I apologize, Frieza the he. But man, was that a struggle. Now, however, when it comes to LGBT content being exposed to Christian audiences, particularly, if it's a forceful, convince you, make you believe it should be acceptable type thing, I'm totally against it. But when you are illustrating reality, 9 times out of 10, you're at least going to meet a homosexual person. 9 times out of 10.
Yeah.
You're telling a 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 season story. There's going to be somebody that likes the same sex in that series. That makes sense. Maybe even bringing in one person that's trans. That would make sense. I wouldn't be surprised if that's in there. That's why I love Degrassi. Degrassi goes through and shows you some of the hardest stuff teenagers can go through. And it's just like, man, that's a real reality check.
And that's the thing about teen media in general, is that it's
Mhm.
only represents things that teens are struggling with.
Right.
So as much as like Elena's relationship with Damon is horrific and toxic, and so are some of the other relationships, there's
Yes.
hardly a healthy relationship in that show.
True.
Teens don't have healthy relationships.
Bro.
Not every time, but a lot of the time they don't. And that comes off in the media. Now, obviously, it'd be nice to have media that demonstrates healthy relationships, so that
True.
people actually know how to do this. Because media does affect people, right?
Right.
But also, they need media too that relates to them. How do I deal with the fact that no one wants me to sit at that part of the cafeteria?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Wow. Yeah.
How do I deal with the fact that whether it's religious or not, I'm bullied for being gay,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of how feminine or masculine I appear on the surface. I'm still bullied for who I like,
Right.
which is something that for the teen is not something that they're going to
Mhm.
be able to control or anything like that,
Right.
especially at that age, right? So they need media and characters that they can relate to as well, and if it, especially if it helps, their mental state as well.
Well,
I'm sure.
I would go a step further and say that on some level, not entirely. So Christians here listening, hear me out. On some level, we need it.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that because you're not looking to go out and actually establish a friendship and relationship with them, hear them out about what they're going through, hear them talk about the type of people they like, and get to the point of sharing the gospel with them. So you at least need to be able to see a well illustrated depiction of some of their struggles, some of their temptations, some of their actual relationships. And that's what's drawn me to this conclusion that although yes, that's lust, it's really more for some actual reasons rather than a genuine relationship at times, especially when we're looking at it in the Bible. The thing is, the events of today are different from the Bible because biblically they weren't looking for relationships, they just wanted to feel good. I want as much pleasure out of life that I can get. Now today, sure, they want to be able to be free, do what they want. That's what they tell you. But when you have those conversations, the pursuit is actually for love. The pursuit is not to simply be with, it's not really about the same sex as much as it's about finding true love. And so we shouldn't be having a conversation about pointing out all their abominations. We need to be having a conversation about, well, what is love? What does real love look like? When we get into that conversation, one, that's where we steer them to Jesus. Two, that's where we steer them to this, what you're pursuing with that person is not a representation of the love that God has established when he created man and women for one another. So we're able to actually then get to the root of the issue rather than constantly arguing about the surface and even more so causing a divide.
Yes, I would definitely agree with you there. So we need that representation so that we as Christians or as conservatives, whatever you want to categorize yourself as, we can understand. Because having a good representation of LGBTQ characters will help the world understand.
Yes, yes. That's why I like how they did it in Across the Spider-Verse. Now I know everyone was mad when Gwen had that Protect Trans Kids poster up in the top corner of her bedroom. I know the Christian audience lost it because that was there.
I mean, a lot of people.
Yeah, they were losing it. They were losing it. And for me, I'm not gonna lie. I'm like, oh snap, that's in there. But then I had to take a second and think. It might be to show support. It might be to say that Gwen is, though I don't think she is. It might be to say that Peter was, though, you know, that would probably be the best representation from some of the arguments that I've seen. At the same time, it's a teenager in high school in 2020, in the 2020s. What are they going to be advocating for? What are they going to be thinking like? That's probably
Right.
what especially respectfully, a teenage white girl's going to be thinking. It's like, well, protect trans kids. Like, okay, I would expect to see that in a little white girl's room. So that's what kind of pulls
And
me back.
fair enough. Like they're
Mhm.
you know, I do what you can to help people, right? Like just
Right.
because we think that same-sex acts are wrong does
Mhm.
not in any way mean that we don't need to protect those children or
Correct.
not say the person's preferred pronouns and all that kind of
Mhm.
stuff. Like that's kind of why I think I've in my Pride Month series I've upset like both liberals and conservatives because on the one hand I argue for the theologically conservative position, but on the
Right.
other, because I'm so specific about what I think the text is actually saying, it has no bearing on gender dysphoria, pronouns, marriage in the government, all of that sort of stuff. So I
Okay.
kind of just let the rest of that stuff go for
I'll
the
have to
most
check
part.
that out and see if I have any responses to it or not. I'll have to check that out. I'm
Yeah,
interested now.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Definitely feel free. So I'm curious. There was something that I wanted to show you.
Please do.
Have you heard of this?
I have heard of Record of Ragnarok. Now, I struggled with watching it, and I would rather collect and read the manga, but I am
Gotcha.
broke and I can't afford to buy manga right now. However, yes, I am in tune with Record of Ragnarok. Hit me. Show me what you got.
I thought it was such an amazing concept. So, for anyone who isn't aware, Record of Ragnarok is an anime that was released on YouTube. Not YouTube, Netflix. I don't know why I said YouTube. Was released on Netflix, and basically how I would summarize it is imagine Mortal Kombat tournament, except anime, like Japanese style anime,
Mm-hmm.
and Greek mythology.
Yes.
It's essentially what you have. The thing is, the humans are going to have a contest against the gods, and if the humans can win, then Ragnarok will not happen, and the end of the world will not happen.
Mm.
So to me, that was such a fascinating concept because now we're translating essentially Greek mythology into Japanese animation,
Yes.
which is wild. Like, I don't know if you've seen Thor in that show,
Mm-hmm.
but he looks insane.
Dude, Thor looks awesome.
Um,
You know who my favorite character is?
in the show,
Yeah.
who is it?
Adam.
Adam. I have to think.
They cover most religions in it, because Buddha's even in it.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
I was not aware of this.
He shows up in season 2. I haven't caught up to it. I just know he's involved. But
Dope.
think of the very first Adam. That's the Adam in the anime. They have Adam in the anime.
Oh, cool. That is so dope. That's something I've been wanting to do for a really long time because I
Mm-hmm.
feel like we could take a couple different detours here. On the one hand, there was another quick thing I wanted to show you because I did not know this existed. Did you know this existed? There's a manga
Yes, I
where
did.
Jesus and Buddha are like roommates in Tokyo.
I might need to actually give in and read it. At first, I was like, nah, that might be crossing the line. But I really want to see what story they're trying to communicate because I think
I
that's
think it's a
extremely important.
comedy. I'm pretty sure it's like meant to be a comedy,
Yeah.
poking a little bit of fun at both.
hmm
Which would be dope. I don't take myself too seriously.
Now,
Yeah,
do you know my theories on Buddha?
I do not.
So, a part of his history is that he was a prince living the rich life. But then, upon going and walking the streets like Princess Jasmine, he was exposed to the poor living conditions, and he wanted to be able to do something about it. So he left his rich life and began to live a homeless man's life. And so, while sitting up under a tree, uh, a light appeared before him. He had an enlightened experience, and that's when he began to shift his message and his ministry. And a part of the studies that I've done, particularly from school, spoke to how he was trying to tell people not to make him a god, but then we see that they made him into a god. And his name at the time wasn't even Buddha. That's just his god name or his divine name. And so when I learned that, I was just like, so you're telling me that he had an encounter with possibly the spirit of God and began to teach the teachings of God, but then the people made him into a deity or perverted what it meant to walk that out. At least that's what I got from my studies. And so that made me actually start to think about how much reach was God actually looking for in the world, but the only one that when they say that the one person that God found righteous was Abraham, well, how much outreach did God do before settling with Abraham? Did he meet with other people to say, hey, I want you to do this, but then they did their own thing? Hey, I want you to do this. Well, then they ended up doing their own thing. How often did that happen? That began to be my thought process. Now, how much reaching out did God actually do? Because if that's the case, then it would make sense, and again, why people are believing in these so-called other gods, and they have these stories that are so similar to the gospel, but aren't exactly the gospel. That would make a lot more sense.
Yeah, yeah. So I would agree with your principle that
Okay.
that humans tell stories and telling a crap ton of stories, and plus all of the integration and the migrating and the mixing
Mm-hmm.
is going to cause there to be a multitude of similarities between all different kinds of stories. So I think that that is a natural occurrence that is completely inevitable. And I would also say to add the supernatural element, I um, I'm very much influenced by a church. I love church history, and I'm very much influenced by someone named Justin Martyr, who is a early Christian philosopher. And one of his ideas was that the demons were the was that the demons were behind the pagan deities and such that existed,
Mm.
and this is why you could read a pagan mythological text, a story about a pagan deity or something,
Mm-hmm.
and see similarities between Christianity and something else, but ultimately it's completely different. Is that for Justin, uh, demons were giving these mixed messages to these philosophers. And so I don't know exactly what I would agree with him there, but
Right.
him, along with Dr. Michael Heiser and
Okay.
others, have, I think, pointed out something important, which is that there are supernatural beings that are at work in the world, that have a real existence and significance, and
Mm-hmm.
that they do influence people and they do want worship.
Oh
So
yeah.
for Dr. Michael Heiser, for example, would say that Baal is real.
Mm-hmm.
He's just so he has a real supernatural
Oh yeah.
existence. and can actually influence people and such. He's Michael Heiser is not polytheistic,
Hmm.
because the notion is that there is only one being you're supposed to be worshiping. These are
True.
lower supernatural beings that God created,
Hmm.
but that fell, and he would rely on
Right.
Deuteronomy 32, Psalm 82, I believe, where the psalm that Jesus quotes, where he looking at the Pharisees and said, "You will be like gods."
Yes.
That kind of quoting Psalm 82, I believe, and other things. So
Oh my goodness. Oh
with
my
all
goodness.
that with all that said,
Izzy. We can't run from this, Izzy. Izzy. Are you on the time schedule, or are we allowed to be a bit free? Let me know.
I can go for a while. Yeah, I got a while.
Izzy. We got Izzy. We're about Izzy. Oh man.
This is
Look,
why I brought you on.
you need to listen. You don't need to listen, but you got to hear me out here. Okay. The part of why he said that about them being gods, right? That's associated to them being judges. Because they have to judge. In the Old Testament, when people were appointed as judges and priests to make decisions like that, they were considered gods because they had to judge between good decisions, good actions, bad actions, etc. They had to judge between good and evil, right? That's what made them gods. But the issue, the thing with that is that it was made evident at the point of the fall that we otherwise aren't actually capable of doing that. Judges have to study and learn and experience different things to be able to make those right type of decisions. And even then, they kind of fail. That's why they have the law to back them up, because otherwise they couldn't do it themselves. But that's why they're called gods, because they're judging between good and evil, which man naturally can't do. What was the thing that the serpent and God said when it came to Adam and Eve eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? The serpent said, "You will become like God, knowing good and evil." God said they have become like us to know good and evil. They just can't judge it properly. That's why those judges were called gods, because they're put in a position to judge it, though they can't do it properly. So that's why Jesus in that moment even made that association. Granted, to show himself to be even more, because he is God, but at the same time, when it comes to us, quote unquote, being gods, it's being able to judge between good and evil.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Yeah. I know that there is some debate about what is going on with the passage that we are referring to.
I've heard about that too. Yep.
Yeah, because there are some scholars who will take the more human approach, right? That these are references to judges,
Mm-hmm.
And some of the Christian and Jewish history has said that.
Mm-hmm.
And someone like Dr. Michael Heiser and others would argue that these are divine beings in the
I also agree.
context of Psalm 82, right? So
Mm-hmm.
either way, though, I think that it is a valid point to say that Jesus is quoting the psalm, because whoever the subject was initially of Psalm 82, they have failed completely.
Amen.
They have failed to do the mission that they were appointed to do, which is likely to judge whether they were divine or human, and to be over nations and such. And they have failed to do that.
Now, I hope I'm not smacking when I'm chewing candy. Can y'all hear all of that or no?
I'm good.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I just wanted to be sure.
Oh, fair. Yeah, definitely a lot of interesting stuff there. So I wanted to mention something. So we talked about a number of things, like LGBTQ characters in media, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anime and some other things. There was a video that you made that I thought would be really important to touch on, and that is the Sound of Freedom. And yeah,
I'm dying to see that movie, man. I'm dying to see that movie.
Yeah, I figured you made a video about it, and it seems to be getting popular in law of attraction. I heard that this was supposed to come out in 2019, but Disney was doing some ridiculous stuff, and so it came out recently, which is very, very unfortunate, because this movie needs to be seen. So yes. I guess, what do you think about it initially before you watch it? What is it even about?
Well, I haven't seen it yet. I haven't seen it yet. what I did do was I watched the interview between Jordan Peterson and one the actor who played the detective and the actual detective. Both of them were present with Jordan Peterson, and they had a
Oh,
conversation about the movie. They had a conversation about their struggles with the movie. Yeah, if you go to Jordan Peterson's page on YouTube, you'll see that they have about an hour-long conversation, and it was a blessing to just sit back and listen to it. And it's the thing is, this isn't a new conversation. It's just a conversation people keep running from. And my biggest thing with this, and it was a hurtful revelation, because I'm not saying that I struggle with that. I don't struggle with being attracted to kids. Like, that's not a thing for me. That's not
yeah.
something I need God's help with. Thank the Lord. I'm so glad I don't, but there are people that do. And here's why I say this, right? The movie is about identifying people who are trafficking kids for sexual reasons, for drug reasons, for several different types of reasons. There was an event about 2 3 years ago where they found a ring of trafficked people, and the ring of trafficked people were young boys, and the people that were in there doing these things with these kids were U.S. leaders. I can't say like if they're like directly in the government, but they hold power in the U.S. that were over in another country messing with those little boys. That's a thing. That is common. That happens. Now, the part of the reason why this movie didn't get traction, cover up. Absolutely. People don't want you to be aware that the people that you're watching movies for, that you like, are doing these evil things. The other side to that is, and there's twofold for the other side, is that one, people are aware, but they're still going to go watch their movies, they're still going to listen to their music, they're still going to go buy their albums, they're still going to talk about them on social media, not because they actually don't like what they're doing, but because they know people like to hear it. So they're going to support these people whether or not they are doing these things. That's going to happen unless they officially get arrested. That's it. That's going to happen. The other side to that is that the reason why I think people are freaked out and just like, oh God, we should talk about it. Oh, that's so disgusting. Oh, that freaks me out. Oh. The other reason why I think people do that, and it's going to be a hard one, is because they fear facing that might be an issue for them.
Mm. I
Yeah.
think, yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I think that's a fair point. I mean, and fair enough. Obviously, messing with kids has a social stigma, and some of that, from the historical scholars that I mentioned, Inspiring Philosophy has quoted them and such.
Love
A
inspiring
lot of
philosophy.
a lot of Christian tradition has tried to do everything they can to resist messing with boys, and that was a huge difference between Christianity and Rome at the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, no, these are image bearers. You cannot mess with them
Yeah.
like this, right? So, um, which is why there was debate and attempt to encourage people to wait until a higher age to get married and all these other things,
Mm-hmm.
trying to avoid child marriage in the West, which again is saturated with Christian values and such.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So we definitely have a lot of that, but I've talked to people where they've gotten real honest and been like, I have no idea why we wait until we're 18. Right? Because
Yeah.
and this is just what happens in culture and society in general.
Mm-hmm.
People take things for granted. They see
Yep.
themselves in this culture and society and just think, yeah, this is just what happens.
Yep.
And this is why people have culture shock when they go somewhere else. Maybe in another culture, a handshake is actually a sign of disrespect.
Mm-hmm.
That's weird to us.
Yep.
But it might be completely normal to them, and they're normal, and they're going to look at us as weird, right? So, but with that said, though, there are people who genuinely have no idea why. This is why, like, I thought it was so important to review this debate. My first live stream on YouTube was reviewing a debate between a Inspiring Philosophy and Muslim skeptic on whether or not child marriage was moral, and it was one of the most insane debates I've ever seen. It's not the subject matter is,
Mhm.
and the defense of the subject matter was one of the most insane. I wouldn't say that the way that they acted towards each
Mhm.
other is what made it insane, but it was insane.
Right. Right.
He literally had to confess, like, yeah, if the girl starts showing signs of maturity, we can marry her
Mm-hmm.
at 9, and even earlier, like
Mm-hmm.
following the example of the great Prophet Muhammad.
Was that a
But
pun? Was that a pun, Izzy? That sounded very. That was very punny of you. Very very punny of you to do. That was good.
but it's a huge issue. It's
Mm-hmm.
still we still do this. I mean, did you see the outrage that happened a few years ago with Netflix when Cooties came out?
Oh, dude, yes. I didn't even touch
You know,
that.
like
Didn't
this
even
is
touch it. I was
still
just
a
like, nah.
problem. Yeah, we've been fighting. Christianity, I would say, and
Mm-hmm.
Western culture has been fighting to try to like help stop this situation, and it continues. It's still happening, and so, but like I said, so because everyone in the West has kind of taken this for granted, no one realizes that like hundreds of thousands of child marriages still happen in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
Um, a lot of things happen. There was a lot of things that debate and debating these Muslims has made me aware of that I didn't know before. And
Right.
now it's like, okay, our society didn't just arbitrarily decide 18.
Yeah.
Like we actually have scientific and virtuous reasons as to why we're doing this. We
What
need
what are
to
some of them? What are some of them? If you don't mind
yeah.
telling me about it, because I
So
have my own
so
ideas.
a lot of the scientific reasons come down to we need to let these children develop because if they don't, then a bunch of issues will happen. So it's the harm, it's the physical harm that this can cause, and
Mm-hmm.
it also might relate to sociology too. We see that a much older man marrying a younger girl is going to cause power dynamics.
Yep.
Man is going to have power in that relationship, and there is
Mm-hmm.
nothing she can do to check him. So
True.
he basically has unrestrained power,
Mm-hmm.
and that is going can very easily become extremely dangerous. We know from the studies that the rate of domestic violence is high in
Mm-hmm.
child marriages, much more than regular marriages. Um, the Obviously we need to not to be crude again, but this is just the reality. We have to wait for women's bodies to develop properly because having
Mm-hmm.
children at 14 and 15 is going to destroy um, can very much destroy their psyche. I mean, they're completely incapable of parenting at that age,
Right.
among a crap ton of other things. But the rate of STDs and things like that can increase. Their hips aren't widened such that
Mm-hmm.
they could produce a child, so that causes problems. So it's like with all these issues at play, if we're going to love God, and this is the argument that inspiring philosophy has for the Christian,
Yeah.
based upon his understanding of virtue ethics. If we're going where the goal of life is to be someone of excellent character and virtue,
Mm-hmm.
if we're going to love God and we're going to love our neighbor as ourselves, then how do we do that in the world? And it seems obvious from the literature, from the science and such, and really just practical things. Like obviously, a 15-year-old can't parent, right?
Right.
Obviously, there are power dynamics in this relationship that can be easily
Mm-hmm.
exploited. Various other things. Uh, it is not loving to do this.
Okay.
So we have to change it. And so Inspiring Philosophy did a lot of work to kind of fight against Islam on that issue, which is why he debated Daniel in part. Other than the fact that
Yes.
Daniel,
Yes.
the Muslim, was the one that decided to challenge him, which is insane.
He embarrassed himself on that one. No.
Oh my goodness, it was so
Now,
embarrassing.
the things
So, but
I
yeah,
would add to that.
but
Yeah.
basically, it's not arbitrary.
Mm-hmm.
18 is when puberty finishes, where we reach a stage of development where we can um, make better choices. Our bodies are more developed, right? So it's not arbitrary. It's legitimately backed by science and such.
So I was giving that some thought. One, as you were speaking, and two, as you brought the topic up, is one of the things that I was thinking about. I often think about the difference between dispensation, and one of the things that I realized was there's two key. I always do this. I'll be like, there's two things about this. I always talk like that. I don't know why, but a part of the dispensation biblically, one is health. Health contributes to your development.
Mm-hmm.
So some studies have shown that you develop faster when you are, for those that are either middle class or lower. you develop a lot faster than those who are wealthy and rich. That's why they look more fatigued or a bad, physique and things of that nature, or even fat. The poorer you are, the more you develop. That was an interesting, concept that was introduced to me. But what I mean by that is, back then they ate a lot more fruit. They ate a lot more healthy meat. They didn't have a lot of chemicals being added to what they had. They barely drank alcohol because they were only drinking it for ceremonial reasons, and they really just took in water. So their bodies were being given the things originally that God intended for them to have. So their bodies developed differently back then. That's one factor to that. Not only that, back then the focus was we're going to really immediately train up our young men to be able to establish a family, to be able to manage in the fields, to be able to take care of a household, to have servants or to be a servant. They were already being trained up at an early age for those things. Young women were being trained up to be wives, to care for their husbands, to care for their household, to raise children. That was cut out a while, like a couple hundred years ago. That wasn't a part of society.
In part because of, I mean, this isn't the entire reason. Again, there were people in the Middle Ages who were like, yeah, you're not going to marry my daughter until she's older.
Interesting.
Example, I would check out that debate. Inspiring Philosophy lays out a lot of good stuff.
So, what was the medieval reason?
It was basically the same. They recognized that there were problems arising from marrying really young, so they wanted to wait until they were older.
Right.
So not everyone obviously did that, but like health experts at the time even were making those kinds of statements.
Okay.
So, but it's.
So why do you think God allowed it for Israel? Now, I'm not saying 9, 10, and 11 years old. No, I'm talking like 14, 15, maybe up to 16. Why do you think it was permissible in Israel?
So, I don't know if it actually was or not. It's possible that that kind of thing was allowed. I don't believe that the Mosaic. I don't believe that the Mosaic Law or the Old Covenant generally was perfect and perfected anything. So I'm okay. So I'm perfectly fine with.
That's a conversation right there.
Yeah. So if they have a cultural, because age is not mentioned in the Mosaic Law, right? So if they have a cultural thing that God decides not to fix, then that doesn't bother me, because I'm working on this argument because I want to deal with the passages and slavery related to the Old Testament, but God is trying to progress Israel. So I think that if the Old Covenant had worked, then Israel would get to a point where that never happened. But also, I'm not entirely convinced that it did all the time. We see, for example, Inspiring Philosophy points this out, but when I believe it's in Ezekiel, when the relationship between God and Israel is being described, we're told that God waited for Israel to be fully developed and even more time passed. And that was described as the perfect time for God to be in union with Israel, who was the wife. And so, based upon that, some Jews even in their later traditions inferred, as well as scholars today infer that even then it was recognized that we could wait longer, and
Interesting.
it would be more beneficial. It would be a perfect time. They would be ripe for marriage.
Okay.
And so things like that. If you see, for example, like even how Solomon describes his wife, this sounds like a developed woman.
Interesting.
Right? This does not sound like a child.
So it's really kind of catering to the maturity of that dispensation, because they were really just starting out as an early nation. So for there to be that present,
coming out of 400 years of Egyptian slavery,
that makes sense. That's interesting.
Okay. Yeah, it would. It would be extremely hard. I mean, it's hard for us to listen to God now. when we go through 3 years of something. And fair enough, right? Because those 3 years are suffering and it's hard.
Yeah.
But the entire group went through 400 years of oppression by a pagan nation,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it makes sense that they are hard-hearted and things like that. And it's like, yeah, God did all these amazing things for us, but it's like also he let us go through that. So, and among other things. So
Yeah.
they are Israel is a product of their time, and God is trying to use this product of the time in order to demonstrate His wisdom and various other things. So how does He do that? Well, He doesn't change everything about them immediately. So you might think that today, just as an example, today. The U.S. would be really dumb if they went to the Muslim majority countries and said, "Hey, stop marrying children."
Oh yeah.
Or
Mm-hmm.
to use a different example, hey, give women full and equal rights.
Mm-hmm.
Like obviously they're gonna say no, but
That would start a war.
yeah, but if the United States say, hey, at least let them drive for a little while. Right. And then we say, okay, now they're driving, but now we have these situations where they might need to drive alone. So how about we let them drive alone for a little bit?
Ease
And so
into it.
we can keep progressing.
Mm-hmm.
You might say that this is also sometimes what happens in therapy with addicts. They might not tell you to stop cold turkey. They might
Mm-hmm.
tell you to find a supplement, find something to replace it. Let's wean you off is the term, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that there are just times where you need to stop what you're doing immediately, and there are times where you're gonna have to take it slow. And so I think that God is attempting to progressively sanctify Israel, essentially.
So
Uh,
can we talk about that from a Christian point of view? And what I mean by looking at it from a Christian point of view is this: one of the main things we aim to do is to lead people to Christ, right? Certain groups think that the Holy Ghost transforms you immediately, you're immediately saved, you stop all the evil stuff that you're doing, you're now saved. But then there's the other aspect to that too, and that can also go two ways, where it's going to take you time to stop doing the sick, perverse, and inappropriate things that you used to do and walk in the way that the Lord wants you to walk. Some people believe that they're still saved even though they're going through that process. Others believe that they're not saved till the process is done. So what do you believe on that?
I'm I'm someone who thinks that God will. I very much stress like accommodation, like divine accommodation.
Okay.
So I mean, it's a really simple idea. Basically, God accommodates our needs.
Mm-hmm.
So the very fact that people hear God in the English language is itself a divine accommodation, because language didn't exist before, but God wants to have a relationship with us
Right.
who speak English. So He accommodates us by speaking our language. So, so that
Nice.
yeah, so that would be a form of accommodation. So, God understanding psychology, our environment, and all these other things much more than anyone else could possibly ever understand,
Mm-hmm.
is going to be willing to work with the human if the human will work with Him.
Interesting.
My professor here, Dr. Philip Long, when we were going over some of the Pauline literature, he noted that for Paul, Christians are meant to choose to um, be in communion with God. We choose to work with God in
Mm-hmm.
some way. We participate in His plan, and we willingly choose to participate, and that is the process of sanctification. We are being transformed by participating in the work and plan that God has for us, and the will that He has for us. And
Mm.
I would equally just to say that we can choose to leave God and reject the plan that He has for us. So this thought process has typically caused me to resist the concept of once saved, always saved. It has opened me up to the possibility of post mortem salvation. because it would be really weird to have people in hell who would be like, okay, I'm done. I repent. Please get me out of here. I want to be with you now. I realize what I've done wrong. And then God would be like, you know, so,
Mm-hmm.
so if you're willing to participate with God, God will participate with you and he will accommodate your needs and desires and wants. And so with all that said, this is also really important because, we're going back just real quick to the LGBTQ community, just as an example, you're going to have Christians who are still same-sex attracted because
Same sex attracted. Yeah.
we are products of a combination of genetics and environment.
Mm-hmm.
And those two things can cause someone to be homosexual, same-sex attracted, and
Mm-hmm.
that is, or someone could have gender dysphoria. And so God,
Mm-hmm.
who understands us much, much better than anyone else, is going to be able to make the right decision as to whether or not, like my friend Jude R. Young, who works in my online ministry, transforms him such that he's no longer same-sex attracted,
Mm-hmm.
or he's going to work with, or he's going to choose, for example, this kind of situation that you have with Samuel on TikTok and Gay Christian Answers on TikTok, who are theologically conservative but also same-sex attracted, and
Okay.
God still works with them just the
All
same.
right. Well, the key with that is, and the reason I think I know who you're talking about. There's two gentlemen who I've tuned into who are same-sex attracted but don't give into the behavior. It's that discipline, and I think, and that's one of the things I want to give them kudos for, is disciplining themselves from that, because you can't stay away from
Yeah.
same sex. You just can't. You're going to be exposed to them unless you become a hermit. And if you're really wanting to walk out what God's called us to, you're going to have to be out amongst them. And so to believe in the power of the blood of Jesus to not just simply take it away at all times, but in some instances allow you to endure that thorn in your side to remind you that you are still carnal. See, when it comes to the thorn in the side, it wasn't about Paul sinning. It was really just
It's about
making
his
sure.
character.
Yes, about his character, making sure you don't lose sight of the fact that you're a human being. Don't lose sight that you're just as fallen or capable of falling like they are. And so to experience that is to keep that reminder in you at all times. So it keeps you from being puffed up. And I really respect people who go through that, but they maintain that discipline. I love and I respect them for that. Because then they're not even playing that game of, well, since I can't have a man, I'll go be with a woman, get them pregnant, and then have kids, but they're still wanting another guy. Like that lie, playing off of that lie is very,
It
very
only
sick.
hurts you and others. Yeah.
Agreed.
Absolutely. And that's one of the and so just to touch on this since we're here, this is part of the misunderstanding between LGBTQ people and Christians. Christians have a combination of different ethical systems. One
Okay.
of them being deontology, basically God commands,
Mhm.
and the other one being virtue ethics, which is the idea that our highest moral, our highest goal to be achieved is to be a virtuous and excellent character. That's what
Mhm.
Born the Side was about. We need to be excellent characters. So, what's really important about virtue ethics is that in virtue ethics, you're going to need to suffer.
Yeah.
It's not a matter of will you or should you. It's a matter of you need to.
Mm.
Because suffering is what produces character.
Mhm.
Suffering is what produces good. And if you're going to attain virtue,
Mhm.
you're going to have to suffer in order to get out on the other side. And I think this is recognized in pop culture today. How many times have our superheroes suffered so that in the service of a greater good or a greater ideal? How many times I played Spider-Man Edge of Time. Spider-Man dies in that game to protect the world from anti-venom and to try to help him.
Mm.
He literally dies to himself in the service of a greater good. And that is
Wow.
virtue ethics, I think, and that is the Christian life. And I think that LGBTQ people will often misunderstand that because they see it as extremely sad that
Mhm.
that this person wants to do something that's okay, and then they've convinced themselves that it's not okay and that they
Right.
shouldn't do it.
Mhm.
But that kind of suffering, the holding off of your desires in the service of a greater good, whether that's the good of others, the good of yourself, or the good of your future self, even.
Mhm.
How many times the highly motivated people will choose not to get off their diet so that they can get the body that they want or the job or the business that they want,
Right.
right? Sacrificing your time to wake up at 6 in the morning to go do something.
You're making me feel bad for eating this candy right now.
Bro, listen, I got Pop Tart here. So you're good.
Oh goodness, no, I totally agree with you, and I kind of wanted to, to kind of bring in the nerd part now too, is when you bringing up Spider-Man, right? For the earlier years, they hadn't considered human relations or character, like human experience when it came to heroism, and so because comic books started to have a fall off, they then began to consider, hey, well, maybe we need to introduce these type of experiences or that type of experience. That's what got Stan Lee and Jake Kirby to make the character of Spider-Man in the first place, was to humanize a hero. That's what made them make him. And at the same time, that just to take that a step further, even when we look at what comic books went through when it came to writing these immaculate stories, and this again, it just really associates back to how everything really just ties back to the true and living God. They had to go as far as introducing or making gods. But not only making gods, they had to make gods that made the universe. Then they had to make gods that had a role or a part in creating the multiverse. Then they had to make the god that's above the gods of the multiverse to be the one above all. So they had to make a divine supernatural system to make comic books more attractive, make comic books more interesting. So what they've revealed, though the audience may not say that, is that you need religion, you need God, you need something supernatural or divine to have a rule over the natural function of humanity. Otherwise, you will lose interest even in your very life. So that's one of the powerful things about actually having those concepts in there, and even more so, like with us bringing that up, having that representation in there, because we're then responsible for illustrating real life. I love the Bible not because it simply tells a love story. I love the Bible because it'll tell you about other nations and how they behaved. It'll tell you about how some people came from one nation and came back in to follow the people of God. They'll tell you about the fall and the misbehaviors of those same people that claim to follow God. Have you read Judges 19?
Oh God.
Judges 19 is one of the sickest. I mean, granted, I've read a lot of the Bible, man. I'm telling you. But when you sit back and you read Judges 19, man's wife whores around. So to not get killed by her husband or get in trouble with her husband, she runs back home. Husband goes, well, concubine, let me specify, it's not a wife, but concubine, that's the specific language. He goes to get his concubine. They go to leave. These are Israelites. They go to this town on Israelite land to house up until they can get home. This old man takes them in. Some men from this town, Israelites, show up at their door and say, hey, that guy you got in there, we want to know him. We want to know him. And what they do, the same thing Lot did in Sodom and Gomorrah. He said, please, take our daughters. Take his wife. Don't take him. They said, nah, we want him. What does he do? He kicks his concubine out to go be with those men. And they take advantage of her all night long. She comes home, falls over, unalived, and then the husband takes her and cuts her up into 12 pieces and sends it to the other tribes to make those other men get in trouble. But I'm like, you're not going to act like, though, man, you didn't send her out there. You're not going to act like you didn't just cut your wife up. Like, what?
Yeah.
That's in the Bible.
It's insane. Yeah, the Bible definitely does not shy away from telling you the things that people have done. I know that some unbelievers, for example, will complain about the fact that Lot was trying to give his daughters to the people at Sodom and Gomorrah.
Yeah.
And later on in the Bible, he's called a righteous man.
Mm-hmm.
But, again, righteous people do evil all over the text. That's part of the point,
Mm-hmm.
is that none of these people are the perfect moral pattern of conduct for us to follow.
Yes.
There is certainly wisdom in how some of them interact with things, but they are
Mhm.
not perfect in any way, and that certainly causes, and that is certainly pointed out in the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. I mean, the same, and it's weird too because the same guy who wanted to give his daughters to the men so that they didn't um, do that to the angels.
Mhm.
His daughters then turn around later on and get him drunk and
Mhm.
sleep with him.
Mhm.
That would count today as rape,
Mhm.
right? So it's it very much does not shy away from that. But so these people are trying to be virtuous and they fail, and then
Mhm.
we have the example of Jesus who becomes the best virtuous person that has ever lived, and so we begin to emulate him. That's part of the cool thing about
Mhm.
Christian virtue ethics is that our virtues, the righteousness that we're supposed to emulate,
Right.
is grounded in the being or ontology of God and the righteousness of the life of Jesus.
So let me ask you this question: why do you think Lot was trying to send his daughters out instead?
So there are two possible reasons that I have in mind.
Okay.
The one was just that, I mean, he just panicked. Like
Okay.
this is a like we there are all kinds of villain quotes like from the Joker and other things where they'll basically say something like, you don't know who you are until you're in a horrifying situation.
All it takes is one bad day.
Right. That horrifying, how you are in that horrifying situation is how you really are.
Mhm.
And so I think that, but at the same time, is it fair to judge our character over a horrific situation that happens on us suddenly and traumatically, in which we are put into the fight or flight response and aren't able to
Mhm.
think critically?
Right.
And so Lot simply just wasn't. So one option is just that Lot just wasn't thinking critically, but also he didn't know what else he could possibly do. And in
Okay.
a more patriarchal culture at the time, um, that just might have been his thought process. We don't need to think he's right, of course. On the
Right.
other hand, relating to culture, um, there is a very interesting argument. And so Dr. Dan McCullen has mentioned this on TikTok, and other scholars have mentioned this, but the argument would basically go like this: the reason why homosexuality would be a sin
Mhm.
is not because of the act itself, or just because God commands it,
Mhm.
or because He respects the sanctity of marriage. The reason is because of socially conventioned or socially engineered systems of hierarchy. In the argument goes, in the ancient world, um, sex, right, as a
Mhm.
thing, was not something that was done in loving consensual manners in which both parties would enjoy each other.
Mhm.
The notion was that sex was a representation of the social hierarchy. So
Okay.
men naturally would, as we see in these cultures, would be at the top of that hierarchy.
Okay.
So for so the man then would represent this in sex by being in the dominant position, and then women, of course, in a patriarchal society, would be in the submissive position.
Okay.
This is fine, but what happens when the role is reversed? And this is something that you see in, for example, this Jewish legend, where Lilith does not want to be on bottom. Uh, the concept is that Lilith is Adam's first wife, not Eve. It's a whole thing.
Mhm. Yeah.
Point is, she leaves the garden because she doesn't want to be on the bottom, as how it's supposed to be.
Hmm.
She wants to be on top. She wants to be over him. This is a problem, according to the story. So, so the argument then is that homosexuality then disrupts this socially convention hierarchy. Why is a man submitting? Why is he taking the passive role and not the dominant
Okay.
role? You're a man, right?
Mhm.
So if this is true and this is the underlying rationale, then that changes the way that we look at Sodom and Gomorrah, because now these are men who are not only being inhospitable and terrible to other men,
Mm-hmm.
but are also trying to put other men in the submissive position,
Mm-hmm.
disrupting and creating a dysfunctional um, um, system in order to embarrass him.
Right.
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 And we actually have remnants of this concept in our culture today.
Mm.
It's kind of a meme or a joke, but it really does happen. Prison.
Yep.
This is right. This is
Happens all the time.
They do this to other men to embarrass them and debase them,
Mm-hmm.
and to even make them submit to the hierarchy that's in the prison.
Buck breaking.
I will demonstrate my dominance over you by doing this. And
Mm-hmm.
so, now, if this is the case, then that is what is going on in Sodom. And so Lot might, again, we can't psychoanalyze characters that we've never even looked at, let alone, you know what I mean? But
Mm-hmm.
but if this is the case, then his thought process might have been, okay, at least let it be daughters, women,
Mm-hmm.
that way. This hierarchy,
Right.
this socially conventional hierarchy is not
Right.
upset, and at least the women won't be embarrassed. Maybe is the idea, which is weird, obviously in and of itself, because the women should naturally feel embarrassed either way because they're just
Right.
being used and not being respected, whatever. But that might have been how it was understood at the time.
Yeah. Well, to add to that, like I think I lean more towards with the second one. Somewhat different because I never looked at it from that hierarchical perspective. But if we were to take that route, the unity between the two should lead to the production of life, which would lead to the production of life that would then contribute back to the community or back to that nation or back to that society. And two people of the same can't produce that. So technically,
that would have been another thing too.
yeah,
Right?
other than your service,
at the time might have thought you can't be fruitful and multiply.
correct.
This is an issue, so
Right.
that too at the time.
But like the thing with that too, like, and it really is hard to just be said the way that I'm about to say it, but it's also true. We know that the scriptures say that if you have a lack of self-control sexually, what should you do? Get married. Now, should someone who lacks sexual self-control genuinely be out here getting married? No. But at least you're married and doing it versus doing it with someone you're not married to. So these men who lack self-control, should we really just be exposing our women, or even men for that matter, to them? Absolutely not. But at least the intimacy between them would fall in line with God's design and wouldn't contradict that. And so that's where exposing the women, though again, that's not good. It's at least that would be right in God's eyes, where everything else is just another sin to rack up your death count. And so it's really hard to think of it that way, but it's also true. It's better you just get married than be out there having sex with whoever you want to. It's better it's women than it be with men, because at least you're not committing that sin against God. And so that's kind of how I also look at it. So yeah.
Yeah, that's very fair. So, yeah, and it's interesting that you bring up Judges 19, because Judges 19 is a similar situation where if this convention hierarchy is true, these men are trying to shame, debase, and harm the other man, which would be embarrassing for whoever is taking the submissive role in that interaction. So there's definitely a lot there. I'm not entirely convinced that this is the reason behind that this is the rationale behind homosexuality being a sin in the text.
Okay.
Because this is actually a really interesting argument. I think this is probably the best argument for a more pro-LGBTQ position, is that the Bible has this underlying rationale as to why it's having these commands, but that underlying rationale is completely irrelevant today. No one is accepting this rationale that is embedded into the underlying command that we find in the biblical text. So if we're not holding to the rationale, why are we holding to the command that produced the rationale?
True. True.
That is a really good hermeneutical point to make.
Hmm.
I'm not convinced that that's the only issue.
Right.
Um,
And I agree with you.
I think that for Paul, again, for example, Romans 1, I in the video I quote that I talked about this. I quoted a affirming Christian who he just does not believe that the Bible is inerrant.
Hmm.
So he does believe that these people can make theological mistakes. But he thinks that it's a mistake for Paul to conclude this. But he agrees, like, the best understanding of Paul in Romans 1 is that the reason why homosexual acts are being condemned of both men and women,
Hmm.
actually the only passage where women are at all mentioned in this,
Hmm.
which is
Yep.
which these scholars would argue is supporting evidence for this issue debasing the man,
Hmm.
not the woman, but uh the best argument is the created order interpretation because of some things, but basically Josephus and Philo would have thought in similar fashions, that we can look back to the created order to see how things should be
Hmm.
and then make conclusions based off of that. And that makes sense. And that concept, that tradition is in Christianity too.
Hmm.
This is literally what Jesus says in Matthew 19. Uh,
Right.
Moses gave the law of divorce because of the hardness of heart, which is also evidence that the Mosaic law was not perfect.
Hmm.
And then he says, but from the beginning it was not so. And so
Hmm.
uh, so it's the case that we can go back to the created order to find out how things really should be,
Hmm.
even if it subverts the Mosaic law. And so I think that for the Jews of the first century, as this affirming Christian I think demonstrates,
Hmm.
uh, they would have seen homosexuality as going against created order.
Hmm.
Um, and as a result, then going against wisdom, because it was also thought that wisdom is found in how God made things. I mean, that's the Proverbs, right?
Hmm.
Over and over again, it associates wisdom with how God made things and
Right.
what God has made. So, and other Jewish literature does that too. So I think that's the better argument there.
Hmm.
But I do want to give I I think that Christians will very often think that the interpretations that disagree with them are completely lacking in the biblical data.
Hmm.
And while sometimes that's true, I think that a lot of people um, can often underestimate um, how good an interpretation they disagree with is. And so kudos to the scholars and affirming Christians there,
Hmm.
arguing that if we're not going to follow the underlying rationale anymore, then why follow the principle that created it is a great argument.
Okay.
In terms of biblical interpretation, I just don't
Okay.
think that this underlying rationale is the main driving force behind Paul's, for example's, maybe the Old Testament's, fair,
Hmm.
but I don't think it's Paul's um, rationale there. So,
So how progressive then do you think the church should be?
ooh, that's a question. Um, I think that so if we're going to demonstrate the very virtue, because that's what we're supposed to do as Christians, right? Be Christ-like,
Hmm.
right? Um, God has these virtues that are grounded in His very being. They are objective and real, and they're grounded in His existence.
Hmm.
Um, so when God saves us, He imbues us with the commands, at least, to live out the same virtues that He embodies.
Hmm.
So we become the embodiment of divine virtue, and so at least we should, right? So if we're going to do that, then I think that a lot of progress can be made.
Okay.
We can help the sex trafficking scene.
Okay.
Let's
Agreed.
stop, let's stop people who are made in the image of God from being abused like this.
Hmm.
We could have ended slavery a lot sooner than what the church did, admittedly, because of this. Um,
Yes.
granted, there's a lot that we got to do with the Old New Testament in that regard, but um, we could have ended it a lot sooner than what we did.
Hmm.
Uh, um, a bunch of different things. I'm not, like I said, I'm not a political person, and
Hmm.
so I don't think I'm a reliable commenter on anything related to politics.
Right.
If you are a Christian that's going to get into politics, then you do have to think about how we should not be a theocracy, but also demonstrate divine attributes in our policies.
Okay.
If you want to go down that road, like love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, right?
Right.
All those sorts of things. So does that mean that we give health care to everyone? Because to love them is to take care of them, right?
Right.
How do we take care of the poor, the widow, and the fatherless,
Hmm.
like the prophets of the Old Testament repeatedly tell us to do,
Right. So
right?
so let me speak to that. So the one thing I want to say to that is that when it comes to the body of Christ, how are we treating or conducting ourselves with someone that may come into our church that is of that community? Like what is our treatment? What is our regulation of treatment? Because it can't simply be, well, you need to stop that. You need to stop. That's not counsel. That's not
Yeah.
support in the biblical way, and that's not showing them who Christ is simply by telling them to stop doing something. You have to show them something to strive towards, which in this dispensation I believe is showing them what love is. I think that's the best way to actually combat that. But in what you are saying with, how are we supporting the poor? How are we supporting our those people that are being divorced, and us doing that through, policy and things of that nature? What really comes back to me is I don't think that, and me and my dad kind of butt heads on this because we had this discussion back and forth. I think we should be a lot more about our support of them, not support of them and their behavior, but how are we supporting those families versus, man, we really need some policies in place. Because let's say we get a policy passed that stops same sex marriage. Okay, what then? Because one, you're an advocate, and two, the people that push for the policy, you think they're going to be out and about looking for a church to go to? Absolutely not. They're going to be looking for places where they're accepted. Now, it's easy for us to say, well, they made their decision, but we never even planted a seed to determine if they actually made a decision. We really just put a law that expanded what that barrier looked like. And here's why I'm saying this. I'm saying this because I keep losing it. Like I have it and then I lose it. But like the reason why I'm saying this is because the reason why, one, and this is just me, they go down that road of wanting that in the first place is because they saw the church in the early church, at least in the western side of things, they saw the early church professing, stay faithful to your spouse. But then when the kids were at home, they saw adultery or they saw same sex behavior. And then when they're going back to church on Sunday, they watch that. So then they're like, oh, you're keeping this secret, but you want to act like you're holy. People were seeing that being a normalized thing. So then when we see them push for that to be law, to be acceptable, it's like, well, why are you getting mad at us for pushing for something you've been doing in the dark this whole time anyway? That don't make sense. So
It's a very rhetorically convincing argument. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
yeah, definitely. So I have a series on Satanism.
Mm.
I know this completely sounds random, but I'm getting somewhere with this. Um, but I so but for that series, I've been reading the Satanic Bible and
Woo.
reviewing it and stuff. So I did the introduction, which was written by a guy named Burton Wolf, and he interviewed Anton LaVey. But one of the things that Anton LaVey, being the creator of Satanism, maybe it's debated in the community. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not a Satanist. I don't need to care. Uh, but but he created the Satanic Bible, and Burton quotes Anton LaVey as basically saying that he came to the conclusion that no white light religion could stave off man's carnal and true nature.
Mm-hmm.
He came to this conclusion because he watched the hypocrites in the church.
Of
I'm
course.
pretty sure he mentions that he played music for the church and also worked at a circus and or a carnival, and
Mm.
he watched these same people who were there on Saturday doing ridiculous things also be there on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
So like if obviously all this is producing is hypocrites.
Right.
So why even engage in this white light religion anymore?
Mm-hmm.
And so so his philosophy is he's an atheist, so
Mhm.
he doesn't believe in God or the devil or anything like that. But his philosophy is a very raw and
Mm.
blunt kind of philosophy, where you and sort of hedonistic, where you say, you want to do these carnal things, let's do them. like just let's do them. Why are we trying? Why are we staving ourselves off like this, being hypocrites? Why are we trying to convince ourselves of fantasies to make us feel better about ourselves when they're
Mm-hmm.
not true? And all these various things. So as long as we have vague moral guidelines, like obviously consent and other things, let's engage in this sexual activity and do
Mm-hmm.
all these other things. The church is not stopping them.
Right.
So obviously they probably aren't meant to be stopped.
Mm.
So, and so it's a very blunt philosophy. I kind of find it to be I mean obviously it's very blunt and raw, but I also find it to kind of be simplistic,
Yeah.
because on the one hand Christians have never guaranteed that they're going to be perfect in this life.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even the only Christians who maybe believe in sinless perfection are Methodists and Wesleyans, and that's like it. So the vast majority of us are like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
we're not gonna be perfect here. We know that.
Well, see, that gets into this though, because I said this a long time ago. Something that moved my faith forward was God exists, whether I believe in Him or not.
Jeez.
Right? Think about it like this. What you were just saying. Well, let's just let people do what they want to do. I forget the Satanist quote. It's do what thou wilt.
Yeah, that's
Right?
from Aleister Crowley.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So if enough of us as humanity, so the only reason we're not out here, you know, graping and taking advantage of people, hurting people and killing people so free willy nilly is because all of us agree that that's just wrong, right?
Mm.
But if enough of us agreed that it was okay,
Yeah,
if the
that's
law changed, right?
so Sam Harris,
Mm-hmm.
a very popular atheist, he wrote his book trying to give an account for morality from an atheistic perspective, and I think he has an admission in there where, like, yeah, we agree, that the psychopath is the minority,
Mm-hmm.
and that these actions are wrong. Um, but if they were to become the majority in a society, then that would be deemed as okay.
Absolutely.
Not
Mm-hmm.
well, I guess I should, because I understand enough about psychology to kind of catch myself here. Not that being psychopathic will automatically lead to like murderous intent. That's not what a psychopath is. Psychologically speaking, what I mean is that if the majority of people in the society become to agree on something, then that thing will become good.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I remembered the quote, but it was
Mm-hmm.
read. I think it was mentioned in the discussion between uh, Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris,
Oh,
and
I love that. I watched all four of them.
yeah,
I watched them like once a month. I watch all
yeah.
those videos.
Yeah, and then there's a Christian YouTube channel which I would encourage you guys to check out called Wise Disciple, and he did a review of one of their discussions, and he quoted Sam Harris's book in there. So I'm getting that from him. Definitely check that out. I mean, check
Gotcha.
out Sam Harris's book too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we need to obviously be able to understand the people that we disagree with, right? So
Yeah, but what that does still speak to is even if we got to that point, it doesn't change the fact that God says that those things are wrong.
right. So
That
we
yes.
the majority of philosophers, whether they're atheists or not, are moral realists, which just means we believe objective moral values and duties are real
Mm-hmm.
and again objective. So they are real and true regardless of who contradicts them, or how long they're contradicted, or the mass scale in which they are contradicted. So, and I would say I mean, obviously we're Christians, so we're more realists.
Oh, absolutely.
But there are atheists who are moral realists because they recognize this, and like I said, I find moral realism to be particularly disgusting. Not moral realism, moral subjectivism, excuse me, subjectivism and relativism. And I think that was demonstrated very well in the debate between Dr. James White and David Silverman. And I clipped this portion of the debate and posted it on my socials. But basically, James White asked, if you were standing at the gates of Auschwitz, all you could say is, "For me, this is bad." And David was like, "Yep."
Yeah.
And
But you still had to do it.
refuse to bite that bullet. I see that other people have, but I refuse. There is no way, and it's not intuitive, and I would argue it's not intuitive to us as human beings to think that trafficking, as we've mentioned, or many of these other things, are just the mere behaviors of people that we are allowed to disagree with, but cannot conclusively decide whether these behaviors are good or bad.
Right.
Or
Right.
a slightly different view, we assign meaning to behavior, but it is just behavior. I can't see myself ever going down that road. It seems to strike at the core when you give a poor man food and water and clothing and all these sort of things, and you help him get on his feet, and then he becomes a businessman, and then you become the poor beggar on the street, and then he tells you to screw off.
Wow.
It seems to strike at the core of something, and that intuitiveness and intrinsicness, I think, among other reasons, obviously, from a Christian and even philosophical point, is grounds for objective morality.
So could we really be like Paul and know how to be abased and know how to be abound?
Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's I mean, yeah, with the work of the spirit, sure. Quick point, no, we're not on Zoom. We are on Restream. I like Restream more than Zoom or Google Meet or anything. I don't know about you. I don't know what software, just random side tangent. I don't know what you use for your streaming or anything.
I use OBS Studios. I'll either record on my phone for TikTok, and to do my videos to edit, I use Power Director to edit my videos that I record on my phone so that I can, of course, post to YouTube. But my lives, mainly for YouTube, are all done on here. What is that on my face? That's so weird?
Oh, that's what is that?
Daggum string. I don't know how that.
So
I'm
random.
like, what in the world is on my? No, but yeah, I use OBS Studios. But I might start using Restream since it'll let me go live on all platforms. So I might start using that.
Yep, you can go live on your platforms. It will be recorded if you pay for the upgraded version. It'll be recorded, so that you can post it elsewhere. Yeah, stuff like that. So it's
Well, thankfully YouTube will let me download it, so that I don't need to pay money.
right.
Take my loopholes.
One of my friends is coming around and wants to hang out. So I will. We definitely need to do. We should plan for this. I want to review the Little Light Studios videos with you.
I'd be down for that, man.
Yeah, I would love to do a live stream doing that. I mean, I have a not to get too much into it because I do have to wrap things up soon. But we do. I think that I have a series called Christians Stop Being Goofy, where I do respond to Christians and what I think to be their goofiness. So anything from mundane as y'all really out here saying God isn't real and you hate him. Like,
come on.
Both nerds here, obviously, we know you can hate a concept that doesn't exist.
Exactly.
But anything from that all the way up to Doja Cat is engaging in demonic evil because she has a red dress on and red paint all over her skin. She kind of looks like a sparkling fallen angel instead of a, I don't know, strawberry or literally anything else.
Strawberry shortcake. No,
Seriously, like, look at the dress. It's like
that's doing too much. I can't do it.
yeah, definitely. But so I recognize that the way that Christians exist in the world and the arguments that they present is a reflection, can be very much a reflection upon God. We're
Oh
supposed
yeah.
to, the saying, and this has been pointed out by Dr. Carmen Imes, Michael Heiser, and others. But the phrase "Do not take the Lord's name in vain" has nothing to do with cussing. It has to do with the fact that Israel was the bearers of God's name to the other nations,
Yes.
and so to take it up, but to do it meaninglessly and to drag his reputation in the mud is disrespectful towards God and reflects poorly upon Israel in their basically evangelistic efforts. And
Right.
the same goes for the church. Not saying that the church is Israel or whatever, obviously, but we do bear the name of Christ, and we have to be careful how we do that. And so, having terrible arguments or bad conversations reflect poorly on that. And so, the Stop Being Goofy series is a recognition of that. So I can I can respond to anything from, "Hey, this isn't really a good argument. Let me explain why."
Right.
All the way up until, "No, you saying that someone's only gay because of a demon is actually terrible."
That's horrible. Like that new song that came out that everyone was just losing it over. I'm like, you can't make such a blanket statement and then hype it. And then the crazy part is some of the people that I saw hyping the song up were people that constantly make videos like disagreeing with Deliverance Ministries. So it's just like, do you think they have a demon? Or you don't think they have a demon?
I can't. I
What?
Well, I don't fully agree with the side that I'm referring to when I say this.
Mm-hmm.
I would definitely agree that terms like pagan, sinner, demon, demonic, etc., heretic, anathema, blasphemy, all those sorts of terms that we all would say are legitimate